Digital connectivity, cloud services, Internet of Things, blockchain are all increasing the speed of innovation while shrinking our world more rapidly than we could ever have imagined. Any business seeking to succeed in today's global market needs to transform itself digitally. As a leader in global connectivity and digital solutions, PCCW Global empowers customers to communicate, to innovate, to demonstrate, to share their ideas, and to digitally transform using systems, data, and automation effectively, economically, anywhere, anytime, via our diverse global network that delivers the highest levels of speed, agility, and security. Our customers' day-to-day business success is essential, which is why they rely on and trust PCCW Global to deliver advanced mission-critical communication solutions and the latest digital services. PCCW Global. Digital solutions delivered.
Aloha, I'm Jamie with PTC. I'd like to thank each of you for joining today's session in PTC's webinar series, Frictionless Business, sponsored by PCCW Global. We'd now like to turn the time over to Tara Giunta from Paul Hastings.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for being with us today. We're very fortunate to have 4 speakers to help us address an issue that I know is front and center for so many of us, indeed the world, and corporate leaders as we look at diversity and inclusion challenges, opportunities to continue the move forward. With us today, we have Tara Kristick. Tara is Vice President of Wholesale, Satellite, and Federal Sales for the Americas, as well as Head of Diversity and Inclusion Committee for the Americas for Telstra. We also have Sonal Patel. Sonal is Vice President for Marketing at Verizon Partner Solutions. We have Felix Seda, who is General Manager of NJFX. And last but certainly not least, we have Nico Rorich, Manager of Network Investments for Facebook. So thank you, Sonal, Tara, Nico, and Felix for spending time with us today to talk about this important topic. I think where I'd like to start off is as an opening question for each of you to address, which really, what does diversity mean for your company, for you and your company, and how has that changed over time? And maybe Tara, I can start with you.
Sure, thank you. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this very, very important and timely subject. So we've talked a lot about what diversity is in our company and why it's so important. And I like to break it down into what it is and what it is not often when I'm talking to people. So diversity is as simple as the world around us, representation of the world around us. It is not present in the businesses we work in today, but it is imperative and critical for the innovation and growth and protection of a company's brand. It's not just ticking a box, because that doesn't do it. It's complex in its definition and also in its execution. And there's no one size fits all approach for any company to make diversity a reality. Diversity is more than what we see on the surface. I think that's also something that's often confused. For diversity to really come alive in organizations, there needs to be a culture of equity, inclusion, belonging, and a leadership team that really fosters that and demands awareness and progress on those fronts, and where the company is actually being tracked on that and they understand the success that will bring to the overall company.
Thank you, Tara. That's a great way to start us off. Sonal, can I maybe pivot to you and get your input on that?
Sure, thank you. And I'll build from what Tara has said as well. Is if we look historically, diversity has really been correlated with demographics. And we have really moved away from saying diversity equals demographics. It's really widened the scope of that definition to really look at diversity in belief, diversity in thought, diversity of perspective, and bringing all of that into the organization from different people in the organization, whether it's male or female, if it's tenured or new to the organization, and really looking at the population within our employee base as representation of our customer base. So bringing that diversity of perspective and thought is really what I feel diversity looks like now in an organization and where we can grow from.
Great, thank you, Sonal. Nico, what about at Facebook?
Yeah, look, I think it really resonates with what both Tara and Sonal have shared. So for us, it's been very much an ongoing evolution and a journey over time. We've sort of really started thinking about this very actively around 2014 and have gone through various phases since then. And some of them were very much goal focused and very much sort of looking at demographics, right? So we have a goal for 50 and 5 in 2019, for example. So that's it's very clear. We want 50% representation across underrepresented people in 5 years. So by 2024, we want to really impact women, people who are Black, Hispanic, Native American, Pacific Islanders, people who have 2 or more ethnicities, people with disabilities, and veterans. So really, since introducing that, we've made some measurable progress, which is great. So we've gone from sort of 43% in 2019 to 45.3% last year. So, small steps, but I think bringing that focus and measurement really helps move the needle on those things. And we've sort of added another goal there around the number of diverse people in leadership. But also what Sonal said really resonates. I think for me, I'm based in APAC. I've led a very diverse team here for a long time. When you look at it from the demographic perspective, but we all had a very common background. So the challenge now has been like, hey, how do you start to really integrate diversity of thought into that, right? If a Korean person and a European person have that same training and background and approach problems from the same way, that doesn't really bring the diversity of solutions.
Interesting, and as all 3 of you have reflected, the evolution is a very evolving area, and our understanding really of what diversity means. Felix, what about you at NJFX?
I mean, I agree with what everyone said. I mean, at the very forefront of it, diversity is about fostering innovation, right? It's about cultivating new ideas and empowering new ideas and fresh thought into the workplace. And NJFX is a little bit different because we're actually celebrating our 5th year this year, so relatively short period of time. But everything that we do in terms of hiring practices, in terms of the people that we engage with, and then the people that we have here at NJFX is about fostering that type of innovation and cultivating and empowering young people of diverse backgrounds, women. I myself, I was hired into NJFX in my 20s, and I've been able to grow and prosper pretty quickly. And that's at the very forefront of what we as a company are looking to do, right? We're trying to change the industry and the world for the better, and allow for new ideas and that next wave of people to really take on that next leadership role.
Yeah, thank you, and all of you have touched upon it. And Felix, as you were just saying, the whole need emphasis on innovation, particularly in the tech, telecom, media, content, social media sectors. I mean, innovation is key to the progress and the further development of the industry as well, right? So Felix, let me stay with you for a minute, if I may. Part of the diversity, just a part, but 2 is also generational. That we talk a lot more recently, actually, at least in the States, about age, right? Ageism, age, young, medium, older. How do you get that mix? And so, and I can say as a more senior person, perhaps on the panel, that the younger generations, the millennials, the Gen Zs, and Xers, they have some clearer expectations in terms of the workforce and where they're going to work. Can you just talk to us a little bit about how you see that issue of those expectations and how your company tries to address them, what we can do more perhaps as an industry in addressing them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the world is changing quickly, right? And we need to keep up. And millennials, Generation Z, whatever you want to call it, young people entering the workforce today, there's a lot more flexibility and flexibility in terms of your workplace, in terms of your schedule, in terms of how you do things. It's just as important as what was once salary and benefits. Those are the main objectives and the main topics that came up. Now flexibility is the name of the game, right? And everything is changing, and really, when like I said, I entered the industry fairly young, and I've been fortunate that NJFX has allowed me to really become a leader and sort of find my voice, and they allow me to go to different shows like PTC and attend all of these conferences and engage with thought leaders throughout our industry. And I think one of the things that I saw quickly was that although there are a lot of young people in the industry, they may not have the ability to find their voice and become empowered as I did, because they're not given the chance to go to these shows and attend a lot of these conferences and engage with these thought leaders, right? And the only way that they're going to be able to grow in the industry is to allow for that to happen. Diversity is not just attracting talent; it's about fostering them and keeping them in the workplace, keeping them engaged, and allowing them to grow and become vocal leaders in their relative subjects. Something that we're doing at NJFX, and I'm doing it along with other companies and other people in the industry. We did something at PTC a year ago when everyone was able to actually travel for a living. We did this informal program called Millennials in Telecom, and it was fairly informal, nothing crazy, but we invited, we did it in conjunction with PTC Marketing Group, and we invited pretty much everyone, and we got a lot of responses from young people in the industry who just wanted some sort of social setting where they could interact and engage with each other and talk about what they're seeing in the industry and what they're doing and things that they don't like and things that they could possibly change together. And along with that, we had a lot of other veterans, quote unquote veterans in the industry, who wanted to help along the way and become mentors and share their thoughts and experiences about their growth in the industry. So having that balance of young people who are really interested in sort of learning how they can become leaders, and then having veterans who are willing to share that knowledge and bring these young people along for the ride, that's important. And along with that Millennials in Telecom thing, I'm now part of the Suboptic group, and we're focusing on diversity, inclusion, and belonging, and we're doing a lot of these unique programs. We're doing a mentoring program now, really the name of the game is really trying to just kind of set new ways of cultivating this young talent in the industry and allowing them to grow and become leaders in their respective fields.
Thank you. That's wonderful, Felix, to see that innovation even within the PTC environment, if you will. And anybody else, Sonal, Tara, or Nico, anything you guys would? Yes, Tara?
Yeah, I mean, to build on what Felix was saying about, the criticality of building the next generation, one of the things that we've actually put in place and we've been discussing is not only mentorships, but reverse mentorships, where the younger generation is really giving their perspectives to the older generation. I was reading an article just recently that this is the first time in history that we actually have 5 generations that are in the workforce, which I actually didn't realize. So yeah, there's traditionalists, baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z. And I think so often the generations feel like they focus on each other's differences. And at the end of the day, what I try and tell people is study after study has shown that at the end of the day, everyone is looking for meaningful work. So let's focus on the commonalities, and then let's talk about how we communicate better, because one of the core differences does tend to be how the generations prefer to communicate. So just understanding the preferences of the different generations has also really helped. Like to be able to talk to some of the millennials and Gen Z and say, look, they really prefer the baby boomers, Gen X, and maybe even traditionalists. They definitely prefer a phone call or a thorough email versus like texting or chat in the Slack feed. And it's people are like, oh, okay, I can do that. Just those types of conversations have really helped as well.
Yeah, that's great. We even see it at my firm, Tara. So interesting. Sonal?
Yeah, I'm going to take it a step further and maybe in a little bit different of a direction as we look at the different generations that are in the workforce now, is that we feel the younger generations have really brought this feeling of you want to be part of something bigger than just your job and your career. And together, the different generations are really making their impact on the society. So what are some of those things that they're doing to pay it forward and give back, whether it's things like digital inclusion, STEM type of programs, and really bringing those into the communities and younger children and students to really learn about what the opportunities are in different areas of business. So I see that partnership too, is like together we're part of something bigger than just our careers and our jobs.
Great, very interesting. Nico, I'm going to go to another topic unless you wanted to drop in. I jump in. Okay, great. Okay, so what we're also talking about, of course, is the bigger challenge I think we all have, which is creating a culture and an ethos in each of our organizations that really is integrating diversity into the very fabric of everything that we do. Tara, can you talk a little bit about what that looks like at Telstra in your perspective?
Sure. Yeah, this was actually my mission when I was asked to lead the DEI group for the Americas. How can we embed DEI, its importance, into the organization to get people to really understand and embrace it and live it, right? So some of the things that we've done across the businesses, we've put together as simple as a calendar of events of cultural activities, religious events, and so for example, Black History Month and Women's History Month, we spend the whole month on our we use Yammer, and we'll celebrate and talk about important people in history, why it matters. We will have a lunch and learn where we invite everyone to talk about the subject. We'll have speakers come in to talk about the Black Lives Matter movement. We just had one that came in and talked about AAPI and the rise in Asian hate crimes. So much of really embedding it into your culture is talking about it a lot. It's not a one and done training. It's embedding it in your constant conversations. It's putting together I don't want to say a schedule because it makes it sound so documented, but it's putting together something that is consistent. So you're constantly talking about what people should be aware of, how they can grow, how they can have a new perspective and understand where other people are coming from. So a lot of it has been around learning and really making sure it's the forefront for people. We also have ERG groups. And so ERG groups, and then the leaders, we have leaders across each of the ERG groups that help them with their goals, and also try and sponsor many of the people that are in those ERG groups to make sure they're being heard across the organization. So it's not just a group that gets together for coffee and to talk about things that they're frustrated with, but it's actually something where they're contributing and giving back to the company. So that's been really successful, and I think people have definitely enjoyed it here at the company.
Interesting. Yeah, talking about consistency and intentionality, right? Not really about the schedule, but the intentionality and follow through, which is so important. Nico, what about at Facebook? What about the culture needs and challenges, opportunities there?
Yeah, look, I think for me, it really ties into something that came up in a number of the points made under the previous question as well, which is about the unifying nature of a mission, or something that brings everybody together. And that's really been a key part of the Facebook culture since the very, very beginning. And again, it's evolved over time, but today our mission is to give people the power to build community and to bring the world closer together. And for us to do that, just is critical to have a comprehensive approach to integrating DEI into the very fabric of who we are as a company internally, and the way that we conduct ourselves with external partners. So it's really closely interwoven into the fabric.
It's interesting, and the part of the evolution is, it was diversity, which then was to metric based, right? And then it was an inclusion, and now a further refinement in our understanding of what it means, which is the whole belonging, right, piece, and that's what we're trying to get to. One of the and Felix, I'm sorry, I don't mean to miss it. Just raise your hand if you want to jump in on this. But so one of the really kind of noted challenges in the tech sector writ large is, yes, diverse persons, and in particular women there's been a real issue in terms of gender, or historically. What is the kind of long-term focus, both immediate, medium, and long-term focus on gender within the broader context of diversity, really to make sure that change is lasting, right? That these aren't just programs, but that it's really what you've all talked about, right? It's effecting change. Sonal, can you talk to us a little bit about what that looks like at Verizon?
Sure, and I'm attracted to the word, Nico, you used the word fabric, and I think that's an important piece to say, look, this is not a moment in time. This is not just a trend or a fad. This is a strategic imperative for us as a company, where it needs to be ingrained in the entire life cycle that our employees go through, from their initial days of recruiting all the way through retirement. Like, how do we look at the entire life cycle and start looking at taking out either barriers to inequity and remove those obstacles along the way, making sure we have the right partnerships within the organization to do that internally, with programs for development, as well as what we're doing from a skill set piece, from a career progression perspective. And we want to make sure we show up for women. It's building the allies, whether it's individual allies within teams, or even women helping women, men helping women. How do we make sure we're showing up repeatedly, like the fabric, as Nico used that term, I love that term, to say it's part of the DNA of the company. And the risks, if we don't do this, it's going to, we'll have less innovation. It'll ultimately impact our bottom line, as we won't be fostering diversity of thoughts that really represent what the diversity is in our customer base.
Yep, thank you. Anybody else want to jump in? Please just raise your hand. Okay, so really the fabric, right? That's what we're fundamentally speaking about, and whether it's from a gender, broader diversity, and again, the way diversity is defined today is also evolving. To be as inclusive, and one point that you've all reflected on in your comments is, what does it really mean for your company and the world, right? That in order to innovate, in order to be relevant, in order for you to attract and retain the talent that you want to retain, right? What does that all look like? So without being too metric based, there still is a role for measuring progress. And so how does your company measure progress in the D&I space, both with regard to gender, but really writ large? Felix, maybe I could start with you for that.
Yeah, sure. Like I said, with NJFX, it's a little bit different because we're celebrating our 5th year, right? I mean, we've had a relatively short time in comparison to a lot of the other companies that are here being represented, but we've done that from the very outset, and I think the success of NJFX is based on the success that we've had in terms of ingraining that into our recruiting, into our entire process as a company. We have a nice balance of veterans in the industry, and then people who have sort of grown up in the industry, and that includes myself. And we have someone else named Sarah Kurtz, who was an intern with us, actually, a summer intern with us, and now she is helping me leading business development at NJFX. And the idea has been to empower her and allow her to find her voice. And at NJFX, we have no restrictions on what you can do. The more the better. We want you to figure out what you like, what you're good at, and what you want to do, and find your own avenue in terms of career progression and growth. And I think that's the way that we measure success. We don't really have any metrics. We're a relatively smaller team compared to a lot of the other companies that are represented here. But really, that's the basis of it. And Sarah, has blown us away from becoming a summer intern, sort of handling data entry projects with us, to now fostering relationships with all of our current and prospective partners and customers. And myself, I came from I came from a political science background. I worked at a financial company prior to this, and I grew up learning the industry really quickly, really fast, and it was exciting, and I'm grateful for my time so far. And our CEO Gil Sansleys has done a wonderful job in terms of cultivating that culture at NJFX, and now allowing us to sort of pay it back and do things like this and see how we can sort of ingrain what's at NJFX to the broader industry as a whole.
Great, thank you. Anybody else want to jump in on how you're measuring progress, Tara?
Sure. Yeah, specific to gender inequality, Telstra has set very, very clear goals at a board level where we want to have 32% of women representation across non-executive management roles. And just as of recently, when we did track that, we are actually at 33%, which is great, as well as 33% representation in executive roles as well. And so there are actual function level targets and objectives we've been set to support, and that does tie into how we recruit as well as various other programs as well.
Sorry, interesting. And it's interesting too, because we don't want to be too metric focused, and yet we need to have some way of measuring progress. And even what we're seeing in the US with regard to diversity and inclusion, even from a regulator standpoint, is look, you need to be able, and institutional investors and others, you need to be able to show us how you define diversity and how you measure your progress, set goals and how you measure your progress. So it's interesting. So let's shift and just talk a little bit about policies, initiatives, tools that each of you have and your companies have both tried out perhaps or considering rolling out to help the empowerment of women and diverse employees in the workforce, as well as in senior leadership roles. And Sonal, maybe I can start with you.
Sure. So at Verizon, we're truly building a learning culture. So there's programs, whether they're mentorship or development, that are focused either on technical skills or on leadership, that we encourage our employees to go through. Some are optional, some are required. So we really focus in on, where you are in your career, what job skill set you're in, or where you're looking to move to really formulate those pieces. Like, you can't wake up one day and say, hey, wouldn't it be nice to have a female CEO? We really needed to build that person. So it's not a once moment in time piece. We really got to be methodical and purposeful on what are those skill sets that would enable her or a diverse candidate to also be in that role and how they would be able to fulfill it. So it takes time. You need learning, you need guidance, help build a confidence within the organization. And it's not just one set of training that'll get you there. So it's really curated over time, and what are those purposeful development programs that can help build women into that leadership position.
Thank you, Sonal. Anybody else want to, because I think as you've talked about, Sonal, which is so relevant across the board, is the whole challenge and opportunity of pipeline, right? And even when we're talking in the context of board diversity, right? That you need to both be creative and innovative in how you look at diversity and how you position yourself to be an employer of choice for a lot of diverse, however you define diversity, including demographic, but not solely, and how you're going to make sure that you position people, both women and diverse employees, for success in order to be able for them to be able to move up the management ladder. So I think that's great. Okay, and one of the things that is always discussed is the whole issue of having a seat at the table and that's important, right? So in order for positions to be informed, programs to be informed, you need to have those voices heard. I think, you know, a couple of you have used that analogy of the voices, right? So you have to have the seat at the table, but it has to be, I don't want to say a real seat, but it has to be a seat that's being listened to and really addressed and incorporated. And so, Tara, can you talk about maybe a strategy or an approach that you think could make that either has made a tangible difference or would make a tangible difference in the recruitment, development, promotion of diverse employees? And Tara, let's start with you, and then maybe Nico.
Sure. So, you know, speaking as a woman, I always do say something as simple as just telling your story can be really powerful, right? To make people around you understand your perspective. So just having a voice, telling your story, giving your perspective can be really impactful to be heard. Look, we see that research indicates that women aren't making to the top of organizations due to a lack of advocacy. So one of the things that Telstra has done is they've put in place a sponsorship program where they have selected women across the organization and paired them with sponsors. And it's interesting because we've talked about the difference between a sponsor, a coach, and a mentor. And a sponsor is really out there advocating for you. So it can be a very powerful relationship. We do know that women are less likely to ask for a support or mentor, which is also why it's important to have this program in place where the women are pulled in to the program. So that's one of the things that I do think definitely helps. Another one is as small as calling things out. You know, creating a culture where you call things out when you see bias or stereotypes playing out. You know, so often we don't even realize we're doing it. You know, we're all guilty of it from time to time. And so just having a culture where people feel comfortable to say, hey, you know, when you said that, and you can do it off to the side, or you can, you know, in my team meetings, we'll sometimes call it out, like, because there was just a couple of years ago, we had a mansplaining problem where I would say something or a woman on the team would say something, and then one of the guys would come over the top and basically reword what we said, and people would be, yeah, and they'd buy in more to that idea. And so we've been calling that out, and actually we've seen a major shift. Instead, we've seen the guys now saying, that's a great idea, and if I can add to that, so they support the idea. So simple things like that can make a difference. And another big one is leaders being measured on their success across EES, employee engagement scores, and diversity for their groups, getting into a bonus, you know, making sure they're advocating for training programs and awareness in their teams. And again, I come back to the reverse mentors. That can also work from a gender perspective. So those are some things that Telstra has done.
Thank you. Those are really rich. Nico, did you want to hop in here?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to do that without repeating a whole bunch of stuff that Tara just shared, because I think there's a lot of commonality and overlap. Just picking up on some of the themes. So I think, you know, at the start of the process, you know, for recruitment, we have a diverse slate approach. So we, you know, really incentivize the recruiting team to go out and find diverse candidates and bring them into the process, so that for every role that we're interviewing for, we do ensure that we have diverse candidates that go through the process. Once we get people in, and I think this has come up a number of times so far today already, is just making sure that we, you know, provide resources, support to ensure that people grow and that they have, you know, a fulfilling, meaningful experience here. And, you know, in terms of the employee engagement surveys that we run, one of the key things that we ask is, you know, how much time do you spend doing work that you love? You know, would you work for your manager again? And those sort of things to really give managers feedback on how they're doing. allyship, I think we're going to talk about a little bit later on, but that's a key thing. And, when Tara was talking about, the mansplaining in a meeting, I think one of the things that I found really impressive early on, and that I've tried to adopt in my approach to meetings, is just to be really cognizant of giving ideas the correct attribution, because it does often happen, that someone will come up with an idea, but they're not heard. And the person who picks up that idea and builds on it kind of takes the attribution or the credit for that idea. So as a manager, I think it's really important to come back and say, like if the second person says something, go back and say, look, that's really great. And, I really love the fact that, the first person raised this, and just to kind of make sure that the room is clear on like, where did this idea come from?
Yeah, exactly.
The other thing that's, again, it's in a different piece, I think you talked about, tools and things that we measure. This is something else that we've worked on in terms of promotions and performance management, is just building inclusion into the tool set that we use to manage those things. So specifically, when we're going through promotions, are we promoting like a representative number of underrepresented people compared to people who are not in that category? So just making sure that we're not just promoting from a single group, but that there is a systematic checkpoint to ensure that people are being given fair and equal consideration.
Yep. Thank you. Yes, and some of those themes that both of you have been really talking about. So in telling your story, Tara, saying giving women and diverse employees really the power of their voice, right? And that also, and this is reflected in everybody's comments. You need the safe space to allow that to happen, and so that it's really a learning moment for everybody, because as you say, Tara, we all do it, right? It's the implicit bias, the assumptions, it's how we've been acculturated wherever we're from. And it's really creating that safe space to make a mistake, to note it, and then move on and not feel punished unless but in the normal context where we all do it unintentionally, even in the mansplaining, where I find in my experience is often just not realized that. So being intentional, Nico, as you've been saying, as a leader or someone else in the room, to acknowledge that and say with the first person, thank you so much for raising that very important idea or concept, as the second person echoed, right, and moving on. So that, but it's creating that safe space. And as you say, Nico, and the shorthand often can be the Rooney Rule, right, where you make sure that for every position, either a new position or a promotion or what have you, you have intentionally diverse candidates on that slate or on that group, so that it's really baking that understanding, awareness, and priority of diversity in every single part of the relationship and the work of each of our companies. So I think that's fascinating and very, very helpful, actionable recommendations and ideas that you've shared. Nico, let me stick with you for 1 minute and talk a little bit about, and then I'll open it up to others. The role of women, the opportunities, advancement of women in the tech sector, they generally underrepresented, whether it's STEM and more broadly. What is Facebook doing, or what's been the experience in terms of supporting women in the industry? Are you taking activities to help promote more gender diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, absolutely. But maybe just let me focus on my particular area, which is sort of in the network and engineering space, because that's probably one of the worst offenders of imbalance. And it's I guess it's reflective of a time, right? So the majority of people who work in network engineering are, when I started, I was, one of the young people. So, we're a generation that's reflective of, what the education system was producing sort of, 30 years ago. And for us to go out and target the existing talent pool doesn't really move the needle, right? So it might move the needle for our metrics, but if we're just taking, like the one or two senior women in the field from another organization, it doesn't help grow the ecosystem as a whole. So that's kind of where we're starting to focus in the network space, is how do we bring more women into the space? And there's probably three things that come to mind. So the first one is, starting with people who are early in their career, right? And really just having engagement with schools, universities, and explaining to people that you can have the most amazing career in the sort of the network engineering space. So bringing young talent in. The other one is sort of cross-skilling people. So typically, we can't take somebody who's mid-career from a completely different field and train them to be, a network engineer. But we can take someone who's got a strong commercial background and is numerate, right? And then we can build the technical skills. Or we can take someone who has the technical skills but not the commercial skills. So sort of bringing people in who have a skill set that we can build on, who haven't had the opportunity. And I think that's one of the things that has been really unique in the network space, where there's been so much growth over the past sort of 5 years, that it really allows us to bring in new people and train and develop them. And then something that we're piloting, and this is a very early stage, but I think is a really key enabler of that second part, is to look at women who've taken a career break for child raising, or sort of to focus on the family part of the working life. How do we make their transition back into the workforce possible, right? So for a lot of people, I think, it's not possible. And it comes back to some of the things I think, Felix talked about, your flexibility being important, but then also really providing a support network, having a pool of people who are going through the same experience, who can provide support, as well as then coupling them with some of the things that Tara talked about, mentors, people who are going to champion them on their path back into paid work.
Thank you, Nico, and so relevant in addition now, because the adverse weighting of impact of the COVID and on women, right? Primarily because of the need to care for the family and maybe have to drop down or out of the workforce. So that's another life event where having those opportunities, tools, and supports to get them back into the workforce. Sonal, can I ask you a little bit about Verizon in this regard?
Sure, and I'll touch upon some areas Nico did as well, and share some of the things that we're doing at Verizon. So from a career perspective, or kind of that recruiting phase, we're looking at STEM programs, but we also have ambassador programs at different universities, where we've kind of worked with the university to say, what are some of those skills or things that Verizon would be looking for to help really shape that conversation at the university level. So if we're looking for engineers with certain type of skill set, we can work that with the different university programs. And we have executive sponsorship that will be ambassadors for some of those programs, whether they're focused in technical disciplines or even in, I'll say, MBA leadership type positions as well. So there's a conscious effort to make sure this whole concept of, look, I can't wake up and have an engineer tomorrow, I have to build her. Like, we got to start younger in the industry and with the schools to really make that impact. So we do have someone that can help lead from a technology and from a business perspective. If I focus in internally and we think about the development of our leaders, one program that sticks out, and because I've been personally working on it and affiliated with it, is what we have as our Women of the World program. And it's a year-long program where women apply into the program. They're nominated in essays to be submitted, ultimately to be accepted into the program. So this will be our second year where we do this program. And the way it works is each woman is assigned a cohort of people of 10 women or so that becomes their squad. And they have a squad leader, which is a senior executive. So I had an opportunity to be a squad leader, and we go through the curriculum together over the 12-month journey. And it's purposeful, curated content that we're taking through. We have face-to-face, or we did have face-to-face meetings, I should say. And we did bring everyone together to go through critical thinking, communication, presentation skills, how they brand themselves. So it's taking a step above the technical skill set they have to say, what are some of those other skill sets you will need to be able to continue to grow and represent within the organization. So that has been extremely well received. We're in year 2 and the applications have doubled. Needless to say, the popularity of the program grew, but it's really focusing on, how do we look at what's happening externally? Where do we make sure we're building the pipeline? And then for the people that are internally in the program today, how are we giving them the support and the tools to be able to be successful?
Thank you, Sonal. Great, great. Yes, Felix?
I just want to add to that, because both Nico and Sonal hit it right on the head. I mean, creating that pipeline is important from an early outset, right? And there are programs, there's a lot of different things out there that we as an industry and as companies can take advantage of. I myself, I was part of this program called Posse, and it's a leadership scholarship program for college students. And you go in as a group of 10 to 12 students, and it's called Posse because it was termed when the term Posse was cool. To refer to a group of friends. So, it was great for me. And they have a career partner program. And I think a lot of these companies, Verizon, Facebook, I know a lot of these companies already are partners with Posse. And what I'm trying to do now with Suboptic and PTC, the whole millennials and telecom thing, is trying to sort of coordinate that at a higher level and see if we can get member companies that are part of these different associations to become partner groups with associations like Posse, because that pipeline is already there. That pipeline of young leaders, diverse leaders, women who want to get into the STEM field, it's there. We're just not, we're not creating and taking advantage of those pipelines that do exist. And we're trying to sort of recreate everything on the fly on our own. In terms of, instead of just working together and taking advantage of these different organizations that exist, that have these thought leaders at an early age that want exposure to these different fields and these different facets of industry. So yeah, I think Sonal and Nico hit it right on the head, and I think that's something that's very important.
Thank you, Felix. Tara, did you raise your hand? I just wanted to make sure I didn't overlook you.
No, only just because I was going to say I'm just so excited by some of the things that Sonal and Nico were saying, just around the programs in place, especially the pilot program that Nico mentioned with women that are trying to re-enter the workforce. I think is fantastic. Would love to, there's so much we can learn from each other, I guess is my point. And then Sonal talking about the group of 10 women that come together and the curriculum they have around that. It's exciting. Yeah, it's great. So.
Absolutely. And before we move on to allyship, I just I want to make sure, is there any, Felix or Tara, let me just focus on you first, but obviously Sonal and Nico as well, anything particularly focused on COVID reentry, the impact that COVID has had, a lot on for everybody, certainly, but I mean, in terms of the workforce and in our sector on women, is there anything further that you, Felix or Tara, would want to add about that?
So from a COVID perspective, we're from our side, from NJFX point of view, we've been operating the entire time. We're a cable landing station and we're open 24/7. Obviously, we've had to deal with restriction just like everyone else. But from our side, it hasn't really impacted our day-to-day in terms of what we're doing. A lot of what we're doing right now is virtual. And it's been sort of business as usual. And in terms of our process, our recruitment process, giving that exposure across the board to our workforce. Nothing has changed on that front. So
great.
Yeah, and Telstra as a corporation rolled out and embraced all roles flex several years ago. So when COVID hit, we were very well set up, well, as well as we could have been, I should say, set up with a system in place where people could easily do their work from home. There's always exceptions, right? Where in telecom and circuits need to be delivered and people need to be in person. So there were challenges around that. But as far as having a system in place that allowed for more diversity in the workforce and allowed for flexibility around when and where you work, that has been embraced, and the company consistently scores really high on it's not just something we say, it's actually something that is supported and believed, and people have said that it makes a big difference in their work-life balance that we're all trying to strive for. On that front, I think it's really interesting because here in the US, we are so far behind other countries on the public policy that they have in countries like Australia and Canada and Europe, and that's really come to the forefront, especially around childcare, right? So I'm hoping in the next couple of years that changes and we catch up, because even for me, who struggled with kids doing virtual school, and then hearing about my colleagues in Australia where their kids, the daycare is effectively paid for, systems like that in place could have made a huge difference, because we saw so many women leave the workforce during this situation. And so I'm hopeful that there is some public policy in the next couple of years, whether it's a child tax credit or some sort of subsidy that even businesses could pay to families to help pay for daycare and child support, would be a really phenomenal thing to see.
Yeah, fully agree. And we're down to the last few minutes, so I do want to make sure that we spend time to talk about allyship, because I think for all of us in our worlds, that's so important. And so maybe, Sonal, I can start with you in terms of what is Verizon doing, if anything, in the whole allyship area? What does it mean, and what do you say if somebody says, I want to be an ally conceptually? What do I do? What does that mean for me? How can I be an ally?
Thank you, Tara, for the question. So allyship to me has also been more than just saying you support a cause or something is important to you. It's really about the action and what are you going to do differently in your day-to-day to show your support or demonstrate your support. We talked about the example of being talked over, or ideas being taken, different credit being taken for stuff. And one example that I've seen, and I appreciate men in the room that have done this, is when you're being talked over and a male in the room will say, let her finish her thought. And what a powerful yet simple way to show that there's support for someone in a room. So I think that's a small example of standing up for someone in a setting. But I think, men specifically and as allies in the gender equality piece, it's really important that they're mentoring female talent, providing really tangible feedback to women. And sometimes that's a difficult conversation for men to give feedback to women. And I think that's such an important piece of how they can mentor female talent. Advocating for them, whether it's in their day-to-day or talent calibration meetings, other forums where they may have an opportunity to advocate or show support for different people at the individual level. And then last but not least, so making sure their voices are heard, giving that example of, let her finish her thought. I think those are some powerful statements men can say to make sure that a woman's voice is heard, especially when they have that seat at the table.
Thank you. And Tara, about at Telstra, and I'll obviously open it up to Nico and Felix as well in terms of allyship and how your company's approaching it.
Yeah, so we've talked about this a lot as well, especially just with our two recent speakers around Black Lives Matter and AAPI and the rise in hate crimes. A lot of it is around talking to people about, look, to be an ally, it is an active just as Sonal said, it's an action, right? And step one in that action is really to educate yourself, really seek to learn about the experiences of the marginalized group and people while empathizing with their challenges, build on relationships, in that group of people, and remember to listen. Don't assume what you think they might want and how they want to be supported. Just listen, and then use your position to shine a spotlight on them and lift them up, and celebrate what they're achieving, right? Encourage them, advocate for them. So it's really a constant action, and it starts with educating yourself.
Thank you. Nico or Felix, do you want to jump in here, or I can move to our closing question? Nope.
Yeah.
Felix, go ahead, and then Nico.
Sure. I was going to say, I mean, so, allyship, it's an arduous process. It's unlearning a lot of the stuff that we've been taught along the way, and it's reevaluating everything that we've done. And for leaders in the industry, at the helm of these different companies, that's a tough task. You're asking them to rethink the entire process of how they became successful, right? And I take it back to the notion of exposure. Like I said, there's so many different events and conferences that are relative to our industry, that are relative to any industry around the world. And something that I've seen is, and part of it is great. You get to see a lot of the same people over and over at these shows, so you develop great relationships. But that's also the problem. You see a lot of the same people over and over at these shows. And I think the idea is, in order to have a true seat at the table, you need to empower people from all different backgrounds, women, cultural differences, young people. You need to empower them and give them that exposure, and give them the ability to be present at these events and these shows, and really get a first point of view as to what's happening, right? Because without that exposure, you're never really going to really fulfill your true success. So
Great, thank you. Nico, did you want to have a comment there? I saw you raise your hand, sorry.
Yeah, look, not much else to add, right? I think it's something that has to be proactive, right? It's allyship, it's a noun as well as a verb, right? To be an ally. And we're focused on building that into the fabric. We have training around it. It's highly encouraged. And I think similar to what Felix said, like, it doesn't always come naturally. So it is something that requires training. It requires ongoing thoughtfulness and practice. And, giving people the opportunity to practice, to see other people doing it, it is really important. And to develop that thing of continually calibrating and tuning it to what is the person who you're being an ally to, what is it that they want or need in a particular circumstance that you can provide that'll make a difference.
Yeah, thank you for that. Just a closing question, I'll stick with you for the moment, Nico, but for everybody on all our panelists is, we have made progress, obviously, as a society, as an industry. And so I want to acknowledge that, but also recognize we still have a far ways to go for women and other diverse persons writ large and in the sector. What would you like to see things evolve around in the future for women and diverse persons in the tech sector? Nico, let me start with you, kind of a closing observations question.
Yeah, look, I remember having a conversation with a colleague who'd been on the team for a while, and kind of, asking him about his experience of what it was to join the team. And he said it was like coming home. And I think that for me is like what I want the future to be, so that any person from any background can join the team and have that experience of being included and being home.
Thank you. And that's a great image, I think, right? Is when we talk about inclusion, belonging, it's coming home. It's feeling, as we say, bringing your whole self, right? So that you feel truly embraced and welcomed in. Before just closing out the panel, Felix, Tara, Sonal, anything else you would like to any closing points you would like to make? No. Tara, go ahead.
No, I just, I would love to see that there are even, it sounds funny to say, I want to see that there's more policies in place, but I want to see more policies in place across the business where leadership are being measured and held to account for the goals that we're trying to reach. And then that extending into the ecosystem of vendors and suppliers that we work with. I think once it builds out to the ecosystem, and it's similar to, the modern slavery questions we ask, the sustainability questions we ask on RFPs, what we require of our vendors and suppliers, that's when we're really going to see change. So I'd love to see that.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because very much as you say, it's I think been more of a focus on, certainly in the United States, on leadership, right, which is so important, and kind of letting the ecosystem address the issues, needing to balance that and allow that flexibility as we've talked about, and have that opportunity, with also maybe some metrics and some obligations. And because how are you going to hold people accountable if you don't really know what you're measuring against? And there's a saying that, we measure what we value, and we value what we measure. And so you don't want to be too metric driven. I certainly understand that, but you have to be able to evaluate progress so that you can hit the goals. I mean, the whole purpose of why we're here today and talking about it, why each of you and your respective organizations play such pivotal roles to help be part of the solution to get to where we want to be. So I just wanted to thank everybody for being with us. So some of the themes that I picked up here, and that it's so rich, so I appreciate, is really the fact that diversity, inclusion, belonging, allyship, these are all important in and of themselves, but it's important also for each of our organizations and for the industry in order to, as you all said, innovate, grow, really have a brand and a company where, as you said, Nico, all employees feel like they've come home, right? And your customers, right? We each in our worlds have customers, right? In terms of that they are reflected and see them reflected in who each of us and our organizations is. Then building these various tool sets and strategies and approaches that each of you have shared today, I found really helpful. As each of us has said, we learn from each other. This is a collaborative area, right, where we should be reaching across companies or organizations to help all both thrive, right, all address this, because it is such an intrinsic challenge and issue for everybody. Then, Rooney Rule, making sure that for every decision that it goes to the intentional piece, right, being intentional about how each of us is going to be an ally, to bake this in, that it's a verb, it's an action, and all of this requires action both individually and collectively. And then making sure that all voices are heard, and that there is a culture of safe space to make a mistake in good faith, to make a mistake, learn and move on, because that's the only way that progress is really going to be made. And then the whole pay it forward, really understanding that each of us, again, individually and collectively, have both an obligation and an opportunity in order to pay it forward, to reach back and pull forward folks who are coming behind us, to make sure that those who are in our universes are all welcomed and heard. And so really being active allies. So on behalf of Paul Hastings and PTC, I want to thank very much Sonal, Tara, Nico, and Felix, each of you for spending your time with us today. I've gotten so many, I've been taking notes, I've gotten so much out of this conversation, and I really appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedules. Thanks so much and have a good day.
Thank you, Tara.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.